When I'm feeling insects crawling all over me, it creates this sensation that washes up and down my body that's just pure pleasure. And feeling that closeness with these creatures makes me feel wonderful and loved inside. My name is Katie Did. In the kink community, you need to have a sort of pseudonym or a way of hiding your identity. I adopted that name because they're polyamorous. When I was growing up, every summer I would spend in the mountains and hear the katydid singing. The development of my sexuality happened in nature. You can have a lot of privacy out in the wilderness, the freedom to explore things that give you pleasure. I've masturbated a lot of places out in the woods. So I would go swimming and take off all my clothes and lay down in the muck of the pond. Just feeling the clay all over me just felt really good. And laying naked on hot rocks and swarms of ants crawling all over me, walking through the tall grasses against my skin. All of these wonderful sensations nature has to offer.
I'm Winder Tashlin. I'm a sex, kink, and BDSM educator / presenter. I was probably around 16 years old when I found a slug, and I put it on and experienced having it sort of just moving around. Emotionally, in an erotic sense, it was very, very intense and very exciting and very forbidden. And I didn't really start exploring again until into college. I had found an entry for it in the Encyclopedia of Unusual Sexual Practices, because I bought a copy of that at my college bookstore because I was so curious about what people did. And I came across Formicophilia and I was like, oh, that's a thing. All right. There's a number of factors that come in when you talk about folks who identify as kinky or don't identify as kinky. Certainly, there have been some really fascinating shifts over the course of the last decade as things that at one time only were seen as being part of the kink world that have become very, very mainstream. The bounds of human imagination are limitless, and that applies to imagining what to do with our bodies and our relationships. There's a lot of different kinds of Formicophilia play, and there's an enormous diversity of reasons someone might do Formicophilia play. I've talked to people for whom Formicophilia is all about physical sensation. And for them, it's just like, this is the best way to get this sensation that I want. For example, if you're using a vibrator, it's gonna do the same thing every time. Putting your penis into a container and then filling that container with earthworms. The worms will writhe and move in a way that provides an interesting and exciting physical sensation, which is unpredictable. Other people might play around wanting to connect to nature. And then for other folks, it might be about specifically playing with pain sensations. There's a lot of bugs that bite.
I just simply enjoy the sensations of the insects. The ants and earthworms are probably the two most frequent ones I play with. I've also played with tomato hornworms, caterpillars, and mealworms, so they bite. Maggots, they also bite. I've done slugs. Insects that have lots of feet, like millipedes, I really enjoy. Insects are the great decomposers. So they are very important for breaking down all the lignins in the wood. If insects aren't there to do the job, it's just left to the mushrooms, I guess. Every time I come out into the woods and walk, There are so many different species to learn about and so many different points of reference for where they like to live and what conditions they like and what they eat. Just simply observing animal behavior. Once you really zero in on, if you're just walking down the trail and focused on a destination, you can miss a lot of those interesting little details. Everything here is part of the scene. I wouldn't think of anything as being off limits. If I'm doing a scene with somebody out in the woods, as long as we agree beforehand, I would say pretty much anything is fair game. So, I might pick up a stick, smooth it out a bit with my knife. And now that the knots are off, you can just start beating them. Sorry.
No, so wait, what happened just now?
I'm very sensitive, and so I go to my happy place.
Almost bringing you to like an orgasm right now.
Not in a genitalia kind of way. I'm not coming or anything. It's just, it's its own thing. I think that overall, attitudes towards kink are getting more accepting. We're starting to see it more in mainstream media. So there's, socially acceptable forms of kink, I feel like, and then there's socially unacceptable forms of kink. And so what's becoming more accepted in society is the like, oh, okay, you like to get tied up and maybe be spanked a little, and some people are into other things, like insects. Many people are really turned off by.
Such a weird sound. You can hear the mealworms, or superworms in this case, squirming around in there. I'm just going to take out a few for our demonstration purposes. Well, there's a couple of things that you can easily do with them. The first and foremost, the superworms are an interesting sensation. Squirmy, they move a fair bit, and they have sharp feet for sort of gripping. Superworms also will bite. I will put usually a bit of honey onto onto an area I want them to bite. I know other people who use juice from cooking hot dogs in the microwave. Then the earthworms, rinse these off. Now, talk about the earthworms. They feel very unnatural, and you can feel that contracting and expanding against the skin. Oh, there's certainly a taboo in the kink community around formicophilia play. There are definitely folks who have concerns around consent. I don't worry over much about issues of consent if I'm talking about a maggot, because that maggot has no higher reasoning or thought process really of any kind. I very much don't feel that way about, say, my dog. My dog clearly is capable of making decisions and doing what she does or doesn't want to do. And thus, her consent is important, which is one of a myriad reasons why I would not have sex with my dog, other than not being interested in sex with dogs. So, I mean, when you look at sort of those issues, then you come back to like, well, what about that earthworm? And I had someone say to me at a class once, she said, well, that earthworm hasn't consented to being on your genitals. And my response to that was, that earthworm also doesn't know that it's on my genitals. The earthworms are being sold either as bird or reptile food or for fishing. No one worries about the consent around that. But if you bring genitals into it, people get weird.
There's a safe way to insert earthworms into the urethra. For a lot of people, it can be disorienting, perhaps, because they have this idea of this organ is this sort of sacred thing that cannot be penetrated, and putting anything inside there is just unthinkable. I put my penis in ice cold water because worms enjoy cold places. They'll be more likely to go in that way. Sometimes that's still not enough. They still don't want to go in, and so I use incense for that. Smoke from incense will make them want to crawl down into, to get away from the smoke. What makes them crawl out, what makes this like a safe thing to do as opposed to them just like crawling into your bladder or whatever, is that the deeper the worm goes, the warmer it gets. Sometimes they back out, sometimes they actually turn around, and so it's a double worm body thing going on that feels really good. I was with a partner. She always talks about the look of absolute pleasure on my face as the worm was wriggling inside me. There's just no other feeling like it. I think a lot of men are accustomed to feeling pleasure on their penis, on this sort of external organ. But you can feel pleasure in different places too, and internally. And so that experience is having this part of my anatomy that I normally think of as being the penetrator and that I normally use for penetrating, to have it then be penetrated. It becomes a kind of flipping of gender norms there. I think that if our society can get to a place of acceptance of people's desires, again, keeping in mind the importance of consent in those desires and the importance of acting on desires in a responsible way, then it would help a lot of people, myself included, to feel more safe about opening up about what it is that we enjoy.